The lawyer said Robin had inherited a mill, and nobody in the room spoke. Then someone laughed. It was not the warm kind of laughter that came from surprise. It was sharp, almost as though Robin had been handed a cruel punchline instead of an inheritance. The abandoned mill had been empty for decades, its windows broken, its machinery rusting, and its walls stained by years of rain and neglect. Worse, the property was rumored to be drowning in debt. Robin had spent most of his life with nothing. As an orphan, he was used to people looking through him rather than at him. So when the lawyer explained that this forgotten building was all that remained of his family's estate, Robin nodded. He didn't argue. He didn't ask for money. He only asked where it was. By late afternoon, Robin stood before the mill. The building rose against a gray sky like the skeleton of something that had once been powerful. Weeds pushed through cracked concrete. Rusted pipes curled along the walls. Somewhere inside, loose metal struck metal whenever the wind moved through the broken windows. Robin unlocked the front door. A wave of cold, stale air greeted him, carrying the smell of damp wood, oil, and dust. His footsteps echoed through the empty main hall as he walked deeper inside. He had expected ruins. He had expected disappointment. What he hadn't expected was the feeling that someone had been there before him. Near the center of the floor, beneath a layer of dust, was a strangely clean patch of concrete. Several boards beside it were scratched, and one metal plate appeared slightly out of position. Robin stopped. He crouched and touched the disturbed area. The dust was old everywhere else, but here it was fresh. His heart began beating faster. If nobody cared about this worthless mill, why had someone recently searched the floor? And more importantly, what had they been looking for? Robin had learned long ago that some questions made people uncomfortable. His parents had died when he was young, leaving behind fragments of memories. His mother's voice, his father's rough hands, and the mill before it became a ruin. After their deaths, relatives and neighbors gave Robin the explanation. His father had made terrible financial decisions. The family business had collapsed. Debts had swallowed everything. There had been nothing left to save. Robin heard those words so often that eventually he stopped questioning them. He never spoke proudly about his family name. When people mentioned the mill, they described it as a monument to failure. Some even joked that Robin had inherited exactly what his parents deserved. He pretended not to care. But he remembered. Standing inside the abandoned mill, Robin felt those old memories pressing against everything he had been told. He returned to the lawyer's documents and spread them across a dusty table. One page caught his attention. The mill had not been listed as an asset lost during bankruptcy. It had been transferred through a private family agreement. Robin read the sentence again. If his father had truly lost everything, why had the mill been transferred separately? And who had authorized that transfer? For the first time, the story of his childhood began to crack. Robin searched the remaining papers, finding dates that did not fit the timeline he remembered. The supposed bankruptcy had occurred years after the transfer. That meant the mill had already been placed outside the family's assets before the collapse. Someone had planned for it to survive. Robin looked toward the dark interior of the building. The ruined walls no longer looked meaningless to him. Maybe his father had not simply failed. Maybe someone had wanted Robin to believe he had. And if that lie had been carefully constructed, Robin could not stop wondering what truth it had been designed to hide. Robin spent hours searching every corner of the mill. Dust covered the old machinery in thick gray layers. Broken windows allowed strips of evening light to fall across the floor, illuminating rusted pipes, abandoned tools, and offices whose papers had turned yellow with age. Everything looked worthless. Yet Robin kept noticing details that did not belong. A recently replaced screw, a section of wall with cleaner paint, a footprint pressed into dust near a storage room. Then he found the blueprint. It was folded inside a wooden cabinet, marked with his family's name and dated decades earlier.
Robin spread it across a table and studied the lines. 3 floors. That was all. But when he compared the drawing with the building itself, something felt wrong. Near the rear wall, Robin noticed a narrow wooden partition. He pushed against it. It moved. Behind it was a staircase descending into darkness. Robin's pulse quickened. The staircase was not on the blueprint. He descended, each step groaning beneath his weight. The air grew colder, carrying the smell of damp stone and old metal.
At the bottom stood a metal door. Robin reached for the handle. Locked. He examined the lock. Unlike everything surrounding it, the metal was clean. There was barely any rust. Even the keyhole looked recently used. Someone had maintained this door. Someone had wanted whatever was behind it to remain hidden. Robin leaned closer, listening. Nothing. He reached into his pocket, wondering whether he should force the lock. Then he heard it. A vehicle. Tires rolled over the gravel outside. Robin froze. The sound of an engine stopped directly in front of the mill. He stood motionless, staring at the locked door. He had come believing the abandoned mill was empty. Now someone had arrived. And suddenly, Robin understood that whatever was hidden behind that door might not belong to the past at all. The question that mattered was simple. Who knew about this hidden room, and why had they returned tonight? Robin barely had time to move. He slipped behind a stack of rotting wooden crates, just as the front door opened. A man entered. He was dressed neatly, far too neatly for someone exploring a forgotten ruin. He carried no flashlight meant for casual inspection. Instead, he moved with purpose, checking corners, opening drawers, and studying old documents as though he already knew exactly what he was searching for. Robin held his breath. The stranger walked toward the rear of the building, toward the hidden staircase. Robin quietly pulled out his phone and began recording. The man descended slowly, pausing at the bottom to examine the locked metal door. He touched the lock, looked around, then ran his fingers across the frame. He wasn't discovering the room. He was checking it. After several tense minutes, the stranger returned upstairs, searched through an abandoned office, and finally left without taking anything. Robin waited until the sound of the vehicle disappeared. Then he emerged. His hands were trembling. If the mill was truly worthless, why had someone driven there specifically to inspect a hidden room? Robin returned to the staircase. At the metal door, he noticed something he had missed earlier. Near the lower corner, beneath years of grime, someone had carved a small symbol into the steel. Robin wiped the surface with his sleeve. His breath caught. He knew that symbol. He had seen it years ago in an old photograph of his father, standing beside the mill when it was still operating. The same strange mark appeared on a wooden sign behind him. Robin stared at the carving. For years, he had believed his father had been a failed businessman who left behind nothing but debt and shame. But this symbol suggested something else. His father had known about this room. Maybe he had even hidden it. Robin placed his palm against the cold metal. For the first time, the abandoned mill no longer felt like an inheritance. It felt like a message. And whatever waited behind that locked door might finally explain why his family had spent so many years being remembered as failures. Robin searched the mill again, this time with a different kind of attention. He was no longer looking at what was broken. He was looking for what had been deliberately hidden. Near one of the oldest machines, he noticed several bolts that appeared newer than the surrounding metal. He loosened them and discovered a narrow compartment concealed beneath the machinery. Inside was a leather ledger. The cover was cracked, the pages yellowed and brittle, but the handwriting remained surprisingly clear. Robin turned through the first entries, expecting ordinary business records. At first, that was exactly what they seemed to be. Then he noticed the numbers. Large sums had been moved through accounts connected to the mill, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars at a time. Several company names appeared repeatedly, yet Robin had never heard of any of them. He kept reading. The transactions continued for years. Some money entered the accounts, Other amounts disappeared into companies with unfamiliar names. It looked less like a failing business and more like a carefully organized financial network. Then Robin noticed something written beside several entries. 4 words. Not lost, protected. He read the phrase again. His chest tightened. The story he had grown up hearing suddenly seemed impossible. If his family had truly been ruined, why had enormous amounts of money been moving through accounts connected to the mill? Maybe the bankruptcy had not been the end of the family fortune. Maybe it had been a disguise. Robin turned the pages faster. Then he stopped. Several pages had been torn cleanly from the ledger, not damaged, removed. Someone had deliberately taken the exact records that might explain where the money went. Robin stared at the ragged edge of the remaining paper. The stranger's visit came rushing back into his mind. He finally understood something frightening. He was not the first person to search this ledger. Someone had already known what was inside, and whoever removed those missing pages might still be searching for the rest. Robin spent the next morning surrounded by old records, newspaper clippings, and documents his family had left behind. The deeper he searched, the stranger the story became. His father's business had supposedly collapsed in the same year. Several properties surrounding the mill were transferred to companies Robin had never heard of. Officially, everything appeared legitimate. The documents carried signatures, seals, and dates that seemed convincing. But Robin knew his father's handwriting. He compared the signatures carefully. They were wrong. The letters leaned differently. Certain strokes were missing. Even the pressure of the pen seemed unfamiliar. Someone had forged them. Robin's hands went cold. For years, he had believed his father had destroyed the family's fortune through bad decisions. Now it looked possible that someone else had destroyed the records first. Robin began searching for people who had worked at the mill before it closed. Most refused to speak. One name kept appearing: Walter Hale, a retired employee who had worked there for more than 30 years. Robin finally found him living quietly outside town. At first, Walter refused to discuss the past. Then Robin showed him the ledger. The old man's expression changed. He stared at the phrase written beside the transactions and whispered, "Your father was afraid this would happen." Robin leaned forward. What happened? Walter hesitated before explaining that Robin's father had accused several powerful businessmen of stealing company assets through forged agreements. He had discovered properties disappearing from the family records while new owners suddenly appeared on paper. Then, Walter revealed something even worse. Your father believed the mill itself was being used to hide the original ownership records. Robin felt a chill move through him. The ruined building he had once considered worthless suddenly seemed like the center of everything. Walter lowered his voice. He told me that if they ever found what was hidden there, they could erase the truth forever. Robin looked back toward the mill in his mind. The locked door, the missing ledger pages, the stranger. For the first time, he wondered whether his parents had really lost everything, or whether someone had made sure Robin would grow up believing they had. When Robin returned to Walter the following evening, the old man's welcome was different. There was fear in his eyes. He locked the door before letting Robin inside, then lowered his voice and told him he should stop investigating the mill. Robin refused. Too many pieces had already fallen into place, and walking away now would mean accepting the same lie he had believed his entire life. Walter looked at him for a long moment. "Your parents didn't simply lose everything," he finally said. "They found something people were willing to destroy lives to protect." Robin felt his throat tighten. What did they find? Walter reached beneath an old cabinet and removed a faded envelope. He placed it carefully in Robin's hands. "Your father gave me this decades ago. He told me never to open it, only give it to you if you ever came looking." Robin stared at his name written across the front. His fingers trembled as he opened it. Inside was a single handwritten message. "If Robin ever comes looking, show him the mill, not the money." Robin read it twice. Not the money. The words made no sense. If his father had known about hidden wealth, Why would he deliberately tell Robin to look for the mill instead? Then something metallic slipped from the envelope and landed on the table. A small brass key. A number was engraved across its surface. Robin recognized it immediately. It matched the identification number stamped on one of the old machines inside the mill. His heartbeat quickened. Walter watched him carefully. "Your father believed the mill would lead you to the truth," he said. "But he never wanted you to find the money first." Robin closed his hand around the key. Suddenly, the abandoned building felt less like a forgotten inheritance and more like a carefully designed path. Someone had planned what Robin would discover. Someone had expected him to come searching. And somewhere inside that ruined mill, his father had left the next answer waiting for him. Robin returned to the mill before sunrise, carrying the brass key inside his closed fist. He found the machine marked with the same number and searched beneath its rusted frame. At first, nothing happened. Then he noticed a narrow slot hidden behind a metal panel. The key fit perfectly. He turned it. A deep mechanical click echoed through the building. For several seconds, nothing moved. Then the floor beneath the machine shifted with a heavy groan, revealing a narrow opening in the concrete. Robin stared into the darkness. A staircase descended beneath the mill. He followed it slowly, his flashlight cutting through clouds of dust. At the bottom stood a reinforced steel door. Unlike the rest of the building, it looked almost untouched by time. The door opened. Robin stepped inside and stopped breathing. Rows of wooden boxes covered the walls. Metal cabinets stood beneath shelves filled with folders. There were property deeds, banking records, corporate agreements, mineral rights documents, and photographs carefully preserved inside protective sleeves. For a moment, Robin thought he had found the hidden fortune. Then he began reading. The documents told a much bigger story. His family had quietly acquired ownership interests in properties and businesses surrounding the mill decades earlier. At the time, those assets had seemed ordinary, even insignificant. But everything had changed afterward. The surrounding land had become extraordinarily valuable. Businesses had expanded. New developments had transformed entire regions. Rights that once seemed worthless had become worth enormous sums. Robin realized his family had known the potential long before anyone else. But they had not simply hidden the assets. They had protected them. Ownership had been divided through carefully structured agreements and legal entities, making it difficult for anyone to seize the properties through a single claim. Robin slowly looked around the vault. The abandoned mill had never been a failed business. It had been a shield, a place where his family preserved the original proof of ownership while the outside world believed their fortune had disappeared. Robin touched one of the old documents with trembling fingers. He had spent his childhood believing his family left him nothing. Now he was standing inside the archive of a legacy that could be worth far more than he had ever imagined. But one question remained. Why had his family gone to such extraordinary lengths to hide it? Robin sat alone inside the vault, surrounded by documents that suddenly seemed heavier than gold. He began connecting the pieces. The land around the mill had once been cheap, almost worthless. But over the decades, highways had been built nearby, businesses had expanded, and entire neighborhoods had risen where empty fields once stood. Resource rights buried beneath the property had also become enormously valuable. Robin turned page after page. The companies listed as owners had changed repeatedly, but the original documents told another story. Those companies had gained control through forged signatures, manipulated transfers, and agreements designed to make stolen property appear legitimate. His family had preserved the originals. Robin reached for a calculator and began estimating the current value of the connected assets. His hands stopped moving. The numbers were staggering. The properties, business interests, development rights, and resource claims were worth billions. For several seconds, Robin simply stared. The orphan who had grown up believing his family was broke was sitting inside a vault containing proof of a fortune that had quietly multiplied for decades. But the excitement disappeared almost as quickly as it came. Robin looked again at the names appearing across the documents. Some belonged to companies that were still operating. Some were controlled by people whose names appeared frequently in the town's history. These companies had spent decades earning money from properties that might legally belong to his family. Robin felt a chill. This wasn't just an inheritance anymore. It was a battle. He imagined what would happen if the people responsible discovered that he had found the original records. They had already sent someone to search the mill. They had already removed pages from the ledger. What would they do when they realized Robin possessed the documents that could expose everything? He carefully placed the papers back into their boxes. For years, the world had believed his family lost everything. Now Robin understood the truth. The fortune had never been lost. It had been hidden. And while powerful companies had grown richer from stolen assets, Robin's family had quietly preserved the evidence. He closed the vault door and stood in silence. For the first time, the billions didn't feel like freedom. They felt like a target on his back. It didn't take long for people to notice that Robin was asking questions. The same neighbors who had laughed at his inheritance suddenly began watching him. Then, one afternoon, a polished black car stopped outside the mill. A lawyer stepped out and offered Robin a generous amount for the property, far more than the mill was worth. Robin refused. The lawyer smiled politely, but something cold remained in his eyes. That night, someone broke into the mill. Drawers were overturned. Old boxes were scattered across the floor. Several documents from the vault were missing. Robin stood among the wreckage, feeling anger replace his fear. They knew. He immediately made copies of every remaining record and stored them in multiple locations. Then he contacted a legal expert named Daniel Mercer, known for handling complicated historical property disputes. Daniel examined the documents for hours. His expression grew darker with every page. Several suspicious transfers were connected to the same group of businessmen, their companies appearing repeatedly across decades of property records. "This wasn't random," Daniel said quietly. "Someone built an entire system around these transfers." Then Robin found something that hurt more than the missing documents. Among his father's papers was a letter containing a warning from an old business associate. It described meetings where Robin's parents had been pressured to surrender their claims. The letter mentioned threats, promises, and fear. Robin read it until his vision blurred. His parents hadn't simply vanished from the story because their business failed. They had been pushed out, erased. The realization changed something inside him. Until that moment, Robin had been searching for money because he wanted to understand what his family had lost. Now he understood that the fortune was only part of the truth. His parents had spent years protecting something powerful enough to make people destroy their reputation and steal their property. Robin folded the letter carefully. He looked toward the dark windows of the mill. The people who had spent decades burying his family's name believed the orphan would be easy to silence. They were wrong. Robin wasn't searching for an inheritance anymore. He was searching for the truth about what happened to his family. And this time, he wasn't going to stop. For weeks, Robin and Daniel worked through mountains of records, comparing the documents hidden beneath the mill with public filings, financial statements, and surviving property archives. Every comparison revealed another crack in the story. Then Daniel found the breakthrough. The original ownership agreement had never been legally canceled. Robin stared at the document in disbelief. The properties had supposedly been transferred during the family's bankruptcy, yet there was no valid agreement terminating his family's ownership. The signatures on the bankruptcy papers were forged, and several critical pages were missing from the official records. The companies that had claimed those properties for decades might never have possessed legitimate title. Robin felt the room grow strangely quiet. His father had known. He had discovered the fraud and understood that the original documents were too dangerous to leave where they could be seized or altered. So he had created the hidden archive beneath the mill. The truth about the fortune finally became clear. His father hadn't hidden the wealth because he was ashamed of it. He had hidden the evidence because exposing it too soon could have allowed the people behind the fraud to destroy everything. Robin looked at the old photographs scattered across the table. For years, he had imagined his father as a desperate businessman watching his life collapse. Now he saw something different. A man who had realized he was surrounded by people willing to steal everything his family owned, and who had chosen to protect the proof until someone trustworthy could recover it. That person was Robin. The orphan everyone had underestimated now possessed the original evidence his family had protected for decades. Daniel gathered the documents carefully. "This changes everything," he said. Outside, the companies connected to the disputed properties continued operating as though nothing had happened. They didn't know Robin had the originals. They didn't know the foundation of their ownership claims was beginning to collapse. And they certainly didn't know that the boy they believed had inherited nothing was now holding the evidence that could cost them everything. The investigators spent weeks verifying every document, tracing every signature, every transfer, and every piece of property connected to Robin's family. Then the final report arrived. The chain of ownership was real. The companies claiming the properties had built their fortunes on documents that could not withstand scrutiny. The original records inside the mill connected Robin's family to land, businesses, development rights, investments, and valuable resource claims accumulated over decades. The numbers were almost impossible to comprehend. Billions. Robin returned to the mill alone. He stood in the same dusty room where he had once believed his family had failed. The broken windows, rusted machinery, and cracked walls looked exactly as they had on the day he arrived. But Robin was different. He remembered being the orphan nobody wanted. He remembered hearing that his parents had made terrible decisions. He remembered people looking at him with pity, as though poverty was the only inheritance his family could offer. Now, he knew the truth. The ruined mill wasn't worthless. It was the key to a legacy worth billions. Robin could have walked away with anger burning inside him. He could have devoted himself to destroying everyone who had profited from his family's suffering. But he refused. He wanted the truth established publicly and legally. The evidence would speak for itself. Daniel and the investigators prepared the case, while authorities began examining the disputed transfers and financial records. Robin watched from the mill as the first official inquiries began. For the first time, he wasn't standing there as a poor orphan trying to prove his worth. He was standing there as the rightful heir to something his family had protected for generations. Yet the money still didn't feel like the greatest victory. Robin looked at the old machines around him. His father had hidden the truth here because he believed someone would eventually find it. That someone had been Robin. The abandoned mill had given him more than wealth. It had given him the one thing money could never buy: the truth about who his family really was. The courtroom was silent when the original documents were presented. For decades, the fraudulent transfers had been treated as legitimate. Now, one by one, the hidden records from the mill were placed before investigators, lawyers, and officials. The signatures were compared. The dates were examined. The financial records were traced. And the carefully constructed story of Robin's family's failure began to collapse. Companies that had controlled the disputed properties for generations were forced to explain how they had acquired them. The answers became weaker with every document. Then Robin finally received the truth he had spent his entire life unknowingly searching for. His parents had not abandoned their family's future. They had fought to protect it. They had discovered the theft, preserved the original evidence, and hidden the records because they knew the people pursuing them had enough influence to make the truth disappear. Robin sat quietly as he read his father's final statement. There was no anger in the words, only hope that someday Robin would be old enough to understand why everything had been hidden. Robin's eyes filled with tears. For years, he had believed he was the unwanted survivor of a failed family. Now he understood that he had been the reason his parents refused to surrender. They had protected the legacy for him, not for money, for the future they believed he deserved. Robin returned to the mill after the legal proceedings began. He walked through the same halls where he had once felt ashamed of his inheritance. But the feeling was gone. The broken building no longer represented poverty. It represented truth. Every rusted machine, every cracked wall, and every hidden document had become part of a story that could no longer be erased. Robin placed his father's photograph inside the old office. He stood before it for a long moment. "I understand now," he whispered. For the first time in his life, Robin didn't feel like an orphan searching for the family he had lost. He felt like the son they had spent their final years protecting. And that realization meant more to him than all the billions waiting beyond the courtroom doors. Months later, the abandoned mill looked nothing like the ruin Robin had inherited. The broken windows had been replaced. The rusted machinery had been restored. The old offices were repaired, and part of the building became a historical archive preserving his family's story. Robin could have demolished the mill and built something grander. Instead, he chose to preserve it. With his new wealth, he invested in local businesses, supported families who had once struggled like he had, and restored neglected properties. When people asked about his greatest inheritance, Robin never mentioned the billions. He always returned to the mill. One quiet evening, he stood alone there inside the restored office, holding the photograph of his parents. The room was quiet except for an old clock. Robin looked at their faces and finally understood. The greatest thing they had left him wasn't money. It was the truth. They had protected that truth when nobody else would. They had hidden it so their son could discover who they really were. Robin placed the photograph carefully on the desk. Then something caught his eye. Behind the original family ledger was a narrow gap he had never noticed. He reached inside and pulled out a sealed envelope. His heart began to race. The envelope was old, but the handwriting was unmistakably his father's. Robin opened it slowly. Inside was a single sentence. "There is one part of the legacy the mill was never meant to reveal." Robin stared at the words. The room suddenly felt colder. He looked toward the dark corridor leading beneath the building. For months, he had believed the mystery was over. The fortune had been uncovered. The lies had been exposed. His family's name had been restored. But now, standing in the quiet mill, Robin understood something unsettling. Perhaps the billions were never the whole inheritance. Perhaps they had only been the first layer. And somewhere beyond the darkness, another secret was still waiting.